X is for Podcast is brought to you by the Cage Club Network, so for all things media, check out cageclub.me. Hey everybody, welcome back to X is for Podcast, the show where we take a look at comics, mutants, magic, and marvels week after week through their many monthly titles. I'm Nico, and you guys can check me out on Twitter and Instagram at NicoAction. That's NicoAction. Today we're going to hit all three M's, taking a look at the State of X, this time featuring Josh, Steve, and Drew, talking about their favorite titles on the market, the state of X-Men as it is, and who they think might be the stars of the next Hellfire Gala, followed by Mighty Valkyries and a trade rating special where we take a look at the complete run of Power Pack, The Powers That Be, a title we began coverage of. But first up, check out that State of X, hear what some of our correspondents are reading, and what they hope to see in the future. And don't forget, if you like what you hear, you might like what you see, so give us a subscribe over on YouTube, Twitter, and Patreon, where you can interact with the show and help shape the future of what we cover.
Welcome back to X is for Podcast. This week, we're going to have a special End of Summers Brothers wrap-up, where we talk about some of our favorite comics in and out of the X line. With me this week is Steven. Steven, say hi and tell us where we can find you.
Hi, it's me, Steve. You can find me on Twitter at HowdyDuda. That's HOWDYDUDA. I've recorded for X is for Podcast previously, and you can sometimes find me over on X of Words.
Hey guys, I'm Drew. You can find me online on Twitter and Instagram at Drewsifer3. That's at DREWSIPHER3.
And I'm Josh Wheel. As always, you can find me at Asleep at the Wheel, WEIL on Twitter, and at asleepatthewheel.com. And for the next 2 years as the Progressive Democrat running for U.S. Senate in the state of Florida, you can find me across social media at Wheel, the number 4, U.S. Senate, and at joshwheel.org. So this week, we're going to be talking about a couple of our favorite things that have happened this summer. Some of them new to us. And we want to get started, since this is X is for Podcast, with what was your favorite book in the X line this summer? And so I'll get started. Jerry Dugan is just killing it on so many comics. Marauders continues to be so good. His new X-Men, his Planet Size, the way he stuck the landing on Cable. But really, I have found myself drawn more and more to Excalibur, which is something that I didn't see coming. It was probably at the bottom of my rankings of the X books going into X of Swords until I went back and reread those first dozen issues or so, those first 2 arcs by Teeny, and reading them together instead of, a month apart with so many books in between really helped kind of tie them and see those through lines she was running, and I had a much greater appreciation. And since X of Swords, I have just loved what she's doing with this book and the characterization, and the storyline with the redemption of Malice was probably the high point for me. The final issue of that arc with Betsy and Kanan going back and fighting to give Malice a new chance on Krakoa is probably my favorite issue we've had in all of the Hoxpox era, like the Dawn and Reign of X. And I love what she's doing with that. The consistency that Marcus Toe is providing with the art has really built something special there. And what she's doing with these characters, the stories she's telling, it's just somehow become like my top of the pile book. It is something that I've really kind of felt an affinity towards that somewhat wasn't expected, because it felt like a little work to read early on in the early issues. But man, I have just loved Excalibur, I think, more than anything else in the line this summer.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, it's not my favorite book in the line, but I agree with everything you've said. I think that the first 2 arcs were, like, as someone who hasn't read previous Excalibur, I didn't know Otherworld was a thing, and or even that this part of X-Men was like a thing, because I'd never really read Excalibur before. So the first 2 arcs were like confusing for me, because I'm like, I don't know anything about this. I don't know where they're going, what's happening, or even like what the direction this story is going into. But once you kind of get the gist of X of Swords and like what's happening, then the book kind of felt like I was like, oh, okay, now I get what's happening. And then it kind of just, it flew off from there for me. I do have a couple issues with that book though, in the fact, like, I really don't think it should be called Excalibur. It should be called Captain Britain.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I am not like saying that, like, and that's fine. Like, we can have a next book called Captain Britain. Why not? Because we do have that, like, that has been a book before.
It certainly is.
So
that.
like, yeah, and that's what I mean. So I don't mind the book anymore. And actually it's kind of become one of the more, like, it's gone up on my list since it premiered. But I think my favorite book would have to be X-Men, even though it did have like some delays over the summer, just because it's by Jonathan Hickman and he's my favorite writer.
Yeah, my favorite X book now currently going on is Hellions, I would say, which is honestly a consistent favorite for me. Since Hellions came out, it has been the book I look forward to most every week. It has made me care about some characters that I never thought I would care about before, similarly to how X Factor did at the outset of its run. And just seeing Grey Crow and, well, Grey Crow and everybody, but Grey Crow and Wild Child's budding friendship has been an absolute like pleasure to me. Seeing his relationship develop with Kanon. Getting more Alex Summers content has always been a blast, and Sinister remains a high point for enjoyability throughout the run. Nanny has become my absolute ride or die favorite. It's
Nanny is literally the best.
Nanny is love. Nanny is life. It's very good. There is a large faction of people who are willing to ride by Nanny's side and go around in that creepy leggy egg ship with her. Yeah, I find it fantastic, but I do want to give an honorable mention to Sword, a book that has like the consistently best writing and art, is just absolutely phenomenal, is amazing, but I think it will be a lot better as a series once it stops being a crossover every issue.
Yes, especially having picked up, right, the most recent issue of Sword, which I believe is number 7, the last Annihilation crossover. And I'll tell you, so I'm a big A cover person. I know that we have so many people who love variants in the X's for Podcast Slack. I am a huge A cover person. I love A covers, and my LCS knows that. And so I was a little surprised when I picked up my books last week and I had the B cover variant of Sword. And I was like, what the fuck, dude? And so I went over to the wall to look. And now, mind you, this was like Wednesday, I don't know, early afternoon-ish, right? So the book had only been out a couple hours and there was none left. And I'm like, what happened? Did you guys get shorted on Sword? Did you? And I mean, because of the crossover and the tie-in, like, it just they had so many late asks and people wanting to get in on it from Guardians and other things after FOC that, like, it didn't even make it to the wall. Like, everything that they had originally ordered in went out, and I wound up getting a variant, which I can live with, but like, it's not the big issue.
It's a good variant.
But yeah, like, it's constantly, and I get the sales things and the tie-in with the Greater Galaxy, and, you know, Al Ewing's other book, but I mean, Sword is one of those that, at least right now, for me, I think it's more clever than good. I really like a lot of the ideas in it. I think a lot of the art is beautiful. Even if it hasn't had the most consistent art, it's had consistently good art. But I'm not totally, like, enjoying it. It's more like, instead of laughing at a joke when you're like, oh, that's funny, like, I'm kind of there with it. And maybe Excalibur is a great kind of match for this, to say that, you know what, some of these books need time to really settle, because, like, I wasn't as high on Excalibur at issue 7, where Sword is at now, as I am now at issue 22. And, you know, hopefully more of these books get time to settle, because I'm still crestfallen over the fact that the book that just hit me in the feels from day one and never stopped didn't make it past 10 issues. Yeah, no disrespect to X Factor on this podcast, because I love X Factor so much and it's always the best. Favorite title this summer, favorite thing you're reading that is not in the X line, right? Every now and again, we like to kind of branch off and give listeners an idea of some of the other stuff that we don't always talk about that we're reading.
Well, I'm going to shotgun through a couple of quick ones because I'm reading a lot of really good stuff this summer, honestly. Let's see. I want to start with the first Marvel non-X thing that I'm reading this summer that's really good, and it's Guardians of the Galaxy. I am reading The Last Annihilation. It's fantastic. I caught up really quick. I got the trades. It's just amazing. It's just more Al Ewing goodness. I highly recommend it. As far as stuff that's not Marvel, but is superhero, Robin and Swamp Thing have been really eating up my time from DC. They are both incredible. they're just fantastic, phenomenal comics. I care so much about little Damien. I care so much about this boy, and I've never met him before. I'm not a Batman reader. I've never been a Batman reader, but Damian Wayne has just pulled me in. Flatline is a delight. Ravager's really cool. Just a great series, and Swamp Thing has been just something like the best it's been since the Alan Moore days of Swamp Thing, in my opinion.
Robin is so fucking good.
Yeah.
I've been wanting to check out Swamp Thing since I saw that it was going to be
do.
a thing. But it's not. Is it the Future State? It's not Future State. Right?
No, it's not Future State. It is a new Swamp Thing, Levi Kamei, and it's by Ron V. Please check it out. It is incredibly good. It is emotional. It is thoughtful. It is focused on the idea of what you do with a bad idea, which is you create a better idea.
So Ram V is, I kind of put him in the Donny Cates world for me right now in terms of writers, which is to say that he's a writer that a lot of people are really high on, but he's really into characters that I am not really into. And so, writing all of these things that I'm not naturally picking up or getting an eye. So like I've seen him on a lot of titles and I haven't picked it up and didn't get what the hype was. And then he did a story in the Green Arrow 80th anniversary comic that, despite the fact that it had all of these great Green Arrow writers and artist pairs and teams from the past of all these runs that I loved so much, like kind of diving back in and giving me little special moments that hit me in the feels with those characters, the Look Ahead Rom V one was probably the best one in the book. It was just phenomenal. And now I really want Bendis to let go of this character so Rom V can write the next Green Arrow ongoing.
Yeah, that would be amazing, and it would be because he doesn't really miss. I mean, my last recommendation, honestly, outside of the big two, is another Ram V book, The Many Deaths of Layla Starr. Absolutely hits me in the feels every time. I've cried over two separate inanimate objects while reading this story. It's been phenomenal. And yeah, between that and like Hollow Heart, which I've also been reading and is also just very touching. It's just been a lot of good stuff this summer.
I'll double back and want to touch in on the Robin real quick because Robin is so fucking good.
It's so good.
Robin is Josh Williamson, Josh Williamson did a really long run on The Flash that I was the opposite of high on from start to finish. And a big part of that is just that I think Barry Allen as a character works better dead than alive. It's very difficult to get me in on Barry Allen books. And then on top of it, when you start, I'm very down on spectrums, which is to say that, what Jeff Johns did in Green Lantern and turning it into, there's a spectrum of these, not just one, was fantastic. But we've now seen that as a trope over and over. And so making the Speed Force one of a spectrum of 7 forces with the slow force and the safety, that did not also do for me.
Yeah, nope. Somebody has to stop Jeff Johns, actually.
So I was not big on that. But then I read Josh Williamson's Future State Justice League, and my God, it was the DC Comics book that I have been waiting a decade for. I don't know that there is something that had me as excited and wanting more DC Comics as those two issues did since 2011. And yeah, so it's made me want to get more. And his run on Robin has been kind of a continuation of that promise. And I've loved the first 4 issues of that book as well.
How great is Gleb Meldikov on that too? I hope I'm saying that correctly, but like Flatline's whole character design is, I want to wear it as well as I want to look at it. It's absolutely fantastic. So fun.
And as a lifelong Green Arrow fan, like as a huge top of the line Green Arrow fan, the reemergence of Connor Hawke does so much for me. Drucifer, what are your picks for non-X-Line books of the summer?
Yeah, so both of mine are Marvel because I'm a Marvel stan. So my first one is probably one that everyone is reading because it's probably like one of the more popular books next to like the X-Men line. And that's Daredevil by Chip Zdarsky, fellow Canadian. So that's actually one of the reasons why I pick it up is because I usually pick up books based on 2 reasons. That's either character or writer. I picked this up because of the writer. My brother is also a huge Daredevil fan. And I've heard people always say there isn't really a bad Daredevil run. And my boyfriend actually was reading this. They're all pretty good.
Well, yeah.
And so
the comparatively down ones are like,
it's like,
and again,
it's like Stanley. It's Stanley, that's like
it's like sex. Even when they're bad, they're still pretty good.
Yeah,
exactly. Yes.
But yeah, I just really loved this series. It's very consistent and Whereas with X-Men, kind of seems like it jumps around a little bit, and there's like stuff that happens in between issues, and like it feels very like lengthed. This is very beat after beat after beat. So like one issue takes place literally right after the next issue. So it reads very well as like a trade, because that's how I read the first 20 or so issues. Like I caught up, and now I've just been subscribed to it.
It's a phenomenal slow burn.
It is, yeah.
I am not a big Daredevil person, and I got into this run about 6-8 months back. And, you know, Chip relies heavily on the artist to convey a lot of the, like, and it's not to say that the artist is doing all the work. Like, this is the way Chip is laying this out. I mean, these are characters who don't talk a lot. This isn't Deadpool, right? And so much in the tone, the colors, the pacing, you know, the way that it's laid out visually. It's a very visual book, and it's gorgeous and nails the characters through the way the dialogue and the facial expressions and the body language. It's you know, it's like a more of like an in the bedroom book. It's a slow kind of, you love the you know, yeah. I am not a Daredevil person, and it has me like, this is the first one that has me really raving about Daredevil in a long time.
And then my second one is actually, it's the Beta Ray Bill miniseries. So basically, he's out to find his hammer, and he's like going to hell to get it, and with his ship, and they kind of have like a really weird relationship together. And it's just like a cute story of him trying to get his hammer back, and it's just I think it's super cute. It's by Daniel Warren Johnson and Mike Spicer. So that's another one I highly recommend. The art is also very, like, I like the art a lot. And the lettering is really cool too. Like, they're very outlined, and color, like the colors, all of the art. Like the lettering is kind of like colored in the art, and it's not really
Who's the
like
letterer on that title?
The letterer, let's give them their credit, is VC's Joe Sabino with Johnson. So yeah, those are my two picks for the summer.
Very cool. Very cool. Oh, you know what? I forgot to. I know that we're just throwing comics at the wall here, but I forgot to mention Gamma Flight, and I should have, because it's been really, really good. It's only on the second issue, but it's been astonishing so far. You guys reading that?
I am not. Robin is another one up there. I love Robin. The two I wanted to talk about were Jeremy Adams' new run on The Flash, with art by David LaFuente and Brandon Peterson. And this is one that, so I kind of said some things about The Flash, you know, when talking about Josh Williamson earlier. I am a huge Wally West is The Flash. I'm okay with lots of other people being The Flash. Basically, for me, Flash comes down to the Mark Waid era. The Mark Waid era is the defining gold standard, can't be topped era of The Flash. And it's not just for what he did in those stories, and not just how he expanded the Flash family during that run. Mark Waid laid out a legacy of the Flash for over 1,000 years that was so just breathtaking and fantastic, with so many compelling characters, you know, so that way when the Iris West Flash popped up in Kingdom Come, like, it tied in and felt true to that legacy. You know, it brought in Bart Allen and everyone in between there. It had this huge legacy that, you know, played back to all the time travels of the Silver Age and classic Barry Allen stories of the Flash. It had Barry Allen as this larger than life legacy character that everyone else was trying to live up to. Not a character having modern drama and relationship, but like, Barry Allen works best as this ideal that all the other Flashes are trying to stand up to, in my opinion. Because, and I think this is one of the things that Mark Waid kind of figured out, was Barry Allen was a pretty boring character, right? And trying to make him interesting by giving him drama or problems only kind of waters down what was great and beloved by that, because he was a great Silver Age character that just doesn't translate as well, which is why he stayed dead for so long after Crisis. And so Jeff Johns kind of forcing him back and giving it over, like, that was the period where I lost Flash. Like, I literally have every single issue of every run of the Flash from, I actually don't even want to say Crisis on Infinite Earths, because I have the full trial of the Flash and the final about 15 issues of the Silver Age Barry Allen run as well, leading into Crisis, then Crisis on Infinite Earths, everything from there forward until through Flash Rebirth by Jeff Johns. And then he did about 11, 12 issues before Flashpoint, and then we started having Flashpoint Flash, and then, you know, New 52 and the Josh Williamson Rebirth. And every time we get a new one, every time we get a new writer on Flash, I pick it up and check it out, and it's just not for me. And I did the same thing thing with this new Jeremy Adams run. And so I picked up the first issue, and it was about Barry Allen and Wally West kind of, like who's going to be the Flash. And, they both kind of want to retire. And then Wally West disappears at the end. And I was like, all right, you know what? This is another one that's not for me. And that was issue 768. So then about 3 issues later, I saw like there was an issue with Wally on the cover, and it was about Impulse and this other stuff. And I'm like, wait, what the fuck's going on? Wait, what's going on? And I picked it up, and I found out that no. When Wally disappeared at the end, it became Wally's story through time becoming the new Flash and totally bouncing back and forth through the entire 1,000 years of the Flash legacy that Mark Waid created, and paying true to all of this in the most amazing way. And I was like, fuck, I can't believe that I didn't pick it up. So I went back and got all the other issues and have absolutely loved Jeremy Adams' The Flash, which is just about finished wrapping up its first arc now, titled Blink of an Eye, and is everything that I have wanted from a Flash book for the last 20 years. I love Infinite Frontier, like what Infinite Frontier is doing for DC Comics, allowing writers to just go in and just cherry pick the best to give us these fantastic stories that it felt like, and characters that we've been missing for so long as they've been trying to force continuity crunch on DC since New 52. This just expansion and free for all has been so creatively rewarding, along titles like you said, like, with what we're getting in Robin, with what we're getting, the things that they can do in Swamp Thing and Wonder Woman and Flash, in Justice League. It's been so great. And so I am loving this era in DC. And right now, I don't think I'm higher on anything other than The Flash. My second title is one that's just about coming to an end. It's got 2 issues left. It's a 20-issue maxi series by Image Comics. It's Kieran Gillen with amazeballs, phenomenal fucking art by Stephanie Hans, and probably some of the best letters in the business by VC's Clayton Cowles. And that is Die. That is Kieran Gillen's super meta love ode to RPG games that has just been visually breathtaking and so incredibly compelling. While it's the type of book that not only do you need to read every issue, but you need to read the essays that he writes and then go onto his blog. And there is so much so much thought into every panel, every issue, every connection. And like any Kieran Gillen book, it's got a lot to say and a tremendous amount of representation on the fluidity of gender and sexuality. And I think, for a lot of people, how role-playing games and RPGs give us an opportunity to kind of safely dip your toes into being someone else that you're not sure what the response will be in real life. And man, it is everything I love, and I am simultaneously like can't wait for the final 2 issues and going to be heartbroken when it's over, but then also want the super deluxe all-in-one hardcover that'll inevitably come out afterwards. And it's one of those books that, I put it up there with like say Bitch Planet and Sex Criminals in terms of that, like, you should probably have already bought about 3 of the volume 1 trades of these to give to people as gifts who don't read comics, because like it's just so good. So Die, need a shout out for Die. Major back issues that you've read recently, right? So stories, because the X continuity has been such, and this is going to be X specific, but the X continuity is so deep and rich, and there is so much to pull from. I know all of us are constantly going back and reading additional things as well to help, either things that we missed or supplement. Maybe 20 years ago, like that miniseries like didn't mean shit, but now some writer on the X line has decided to build a whole new series based on a minor character from it, and so you gotta super dive in and find it. Stuff like that. So, favorite back issues or back reads? What have you been digging into this summer?
So this is pretty much all I've been doing all year, because I came on this podcast in January, and like I thought I knew the X-Men, and then I was like, I think I need to polish up a little more on my X-Men. So like most people on X Twitter, I got the Inferno omnibus, so I've been reading all of Inferno. I actually finished it last week, like all of the tie-ins and everything.
That's an incredible accomplishment, because Inferno, correct me if I'm wrong, right? It's like 342 issues long.
It's a very large omnibus, and the omnibus I don't even think has everything. I don't think it has everything in it.
It's 1,200 pages, and this one has...
It is so much fucking content.
Yeah, it's a brick.
She
it's a cinder block.
Thick with 5 C's, and like these are all, you guys can't see, but these are all the issues in it.
That's all that's all the issues that could fit on the back cover.
Yeah, that can fit on the back cover. It took me 2 months, but I liked it a lot. And I started with X Factor #1 and kind of went through that line. And, I was waiting for my omnibus to come in, so I read Excalibur a little bit. I read some Wolverine, the 89 run, Chris Claremont. And then we interviewed Mike Carey. So I've been finishing up his run, Age of X, and I'm almost done, like the Aftermath and the post Age of X stuff when they're trying to find Phoenix and Lorna and Havoc in the Shi'ar space.
Yeah, the Mike Carey one was a much more enjoyable read when I dove back into that over the last few years. The Inferno was work to get through for me. I know there's people are very divided on Inferno. Either you love it and you think it's seminal and the most important, or you're just like, man, that thing is overrated, and I tend to be in the later camp. It has created so many great things afterwards, but just in terms of actually reading it, like, it is so much.
I liked it a lot. It was probably one of my more favorite tie-ins in like big events. The tie-ins, though, some of them were not my favorite. I'm not a huge Power Pack fan, so the Power Pack couple tie-ins were kind of rough for me. And then a lot, like with the tie-ins too, that's kind of interesting, is that they don't even really tie into the story. They just kind of happen when the story is happening. And it's like, well, demons are coming in because of the X-Men. Everyone else lives in New York, so everyone else is fighting demons too. Like, it has nothing to do with like the X-Men or Madeline or magic at all. It's just them fighting demons. I think in the Avengers ones, they don't even really do that. It's like a demon is in it, so they put it in there.
The main X-Men X Factor story has about 4 really tight issues when the two groups come together and everything culminates. But oh my God, the lead up and the run, like there's gotta be at least 3 to 4 issues in each title before the two groups get together.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the New Mutants, which is very good. You have Exterminators,
also very
which
good.
is good, but has a lot of redundancy. Like New Mutants and Exterminators, if it was published today, should have been written as like one crossover, not 2 separate issues, like retelling a lot of the same. And then you have the tie-ins, and then you have like Prelude and Aftermath, and then you have there's a solid 12 issues in there, but for me, it's just spread out over like, I joked about 300 some issues, but it's spread out over honestly and legitimately 20 some issues.
It's an edifice. It's an edifice.
It's 21 issues of X Factor, Exterminator, X-Men, and New Mutants.
Yeah, so, just those before you get into the tie-in. So that's just 21 that.
And then there's
could have been 12 for me.
The Spider-Man tie-in. I think there's more Spider-Man issues than there are some like New Mutants issues. So.
Well, because it turned New York upside down, which was a cool thing, and a lot of people played into like the fun art style on it. But yeah, those are not as important for the story. But if you're trying to read everything, for me, it felt like a labor, which takes away from some of the highs. Because there are highs, don't get me wrong. Like it's a very important crossover to have read. It's the base. It's been drawn from in so many stories for the past 30, 40 years since then. So, how about you, Steve? What were you digging into this summer?
I reread Inferno as well at one point this summer. I do often. I really like Inferno. I've been on record as saying X of Swords to 10 of Swords is my favorite X-Men crossover since Inferno. It's extremely good. And I also reread that this summer. But the main thing I've been working through was I reread Watchmen because I'm trying to read Doomsday Clock, and it's all feeling like a mistake. It's all feeling like a mistake at this point, but that's because
Speaking of major events that feel like labor to get through.
Yeah, it feels. I'm 7 issues into Doomsday Clock, and it's been quite a labor. That's for sure. The mime is attractive. That's my takeaway so far. I'm 7 issues in. The mime, pretty hot.
So I didn't come into this with things that I felt were laborious. And it's not to say like, there are people who love everything, and it's not to say that it's bad, right? I'm making point. For me, these were ones that, definitely were some work to get through.
Of course, yeah.
For me, I think one of my favorites that I went back through is I ordered and got the Ultimate Editions of the Mystique ongoing. The first 13 issues were by Brian K. Vaughan, which is a, rarely miss. I mean, those, you're in for some good comic there. And then the next 9 issues were by Sean McKeever, which played very true. It was really McKeever's kind of attempt to wrap up Brian K. Vaughan's story, and I don't know how much or if they worked together at all on that. I'd love to know kind of like the inside baseball on that, because it really was, he did not establish anything new. He just kind of took it in the rest of the way to what he felt was the natural conclusion. The characterization started feeling off from how good they were in the first one. It did not finish as strong as it started, but man, just good Mystique. I love Mystique. I am on record in our Discord as saying that we're going to be fed some phenomenal Mystique in the coming months in Trial of Magneto. I love good Mystique. I love Shannon Maguire's X-Men Black Mystique as well. Going back, the Mystique solo spotlight issues in Claremont's Uncanny are some of my favorite. I think 177 is one of them, where she pairs up with Arcade and has him put her through the simulation of trying to take down all the X-Men with that beautiful JRJR art back when people had faces that look like faces in his books.
Yeah.
I'm big on Mystique, and I'm glad I got that opportunity. The other one, and this is one I just read the other day and was raving about in our chat, is X-Men Volume 2, number 6, which is one of the Jim Lee runs, right? So Jim Lee run on X-Men number 2 really kind of ran like we think of it as like his big X-Men number 1, and it went through 11, and we know that these are ones that he wasn't the writer or the scripter, but he was the plotter. So he basically he plotted out and planned and laid out and drew the whole thing, and then gave notes to the scripters, and they filled in the dialogue. And I think this issue is probably my favorite, and whether it's the most important or just most of his 11 issues, it has so much going on in it. It has callbacks and returns of characters from Acts of Vengeance with Psylocke and Wolverine. It brings back Maverick and Sabretooth and goes into Logan's CIA time with flashbacks into the 3 of them. It has Omega Red still coming from his origin an issue or 2 earlier. It has, your major 90s X-Men. It has diversions into Mojoverse with Longshot Dazzler and Lila Cheney. There is so much happening and so many beats in this, and yet it's still a really kind of tight chapter in this story he's telling right in the middle of his 11 issues. So we're really talking about like build up from the beginning before he starts kind of running downhill to the end. The last 2 issues, obviously he's wrapped up everything else and is finishing with Mojoverse, and so this is where kind of everything's there at once with just that classic Jim Lee X-Men art. I loved it. Like, I opened it and I forgot that like this is kind of that pinnacle of that run, which, in a lot of ways is kind of like lacking substance. Like, I think most of those stories we tend to think of as fun, or we love the way they look, not as like seminal character beats or moments.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff.
All right, next up, let's go back to the modern X line, the Reign of X. And let me ask you, which characters do you want to see more from between now and the next Hellfire Gala? We do know that we're going to be getting an annual Hellfire Gala. Hopefully it doesn't take over the whole month. Hopefully we get like a nice big kind of oversized annual moving forward. But we are going to be having this yearly event now. So between now and then, which X characters do you want to see kind of step up and shine a little more?
So mine's not really a character. Mine's more of a group, and that's Generation X. And we were talking about this in the green room, where like all of the characters basically, like Chamber, what happened to Chamber? Where is he?
Where is my sad boy? And when are we getting a story about him wanting to be resurrected and have a face back so he can finally kiss Husk? And where is it? I've been waiting 30 fucking years for this story, goddammit.
And we were talking in the green room about there isn't even any Generation X trades or collections coming out. Like, it's just the Generation X train is not running, and I'm not really here for it.
If you don't have all 75 issues on floppy, like I do, it's very hard to read. They are not all available on Marvel Unlimited. They are not, I believe, all even available on Comixology. They have not done any major reprints of them. They finally, very recently just did an Ultimate Edition of, was it the first 12 issues? First 10, 12 issues? Hopefully, the numbers on that are good enough that they continue and we actually get a collection, a full 75 issue run in trade for once. But there is so much good stuff. And for me, and we're going to talk a lot about this in an upcoming episode of X's for Podcast, where we have a writer from the OG Gen X series come back to talk 90s Marvel X-Men inside baseball and those characters I fucking love so much with us. But for me, some of my favorite moments from this are when we get into the 40s and 50s, which are some of the least reprinted and hardest to get a hold of issues for fans to read. And there is so much great stuff in there.
Yeah, I've been wanting to get into more Generation X, and I don't read really through Comixology or Marvel Unlimited just because I read through trade or physical, and I can't find any Generation X anywhere.
It's because they don't print it. Yeah. But they're starting to, hopefully.
I'd like to see M-Plate more, honestly. He was somebody I really fucking love from Generation X. I've always been a big M-Plate fan. Just a scary villain. Really cool, awesome design. I always loved it. When you said a team, that kind of brought it to the forefront of my mind of what I really want, because like there are individual mutants that I want to see more of in this next year. I want to see more of Iska the Unbeaten. I want to see more of Cora. I want to see Elisa Tager. I want to see Cypher from Young X-Men reappear, so to speak. I really want to see Jesse Drake on the island, and that leads to what I really want to see more of. Is I want to see more of the development of Vita Ayala's non-binary and trans kids that we saw show up just recently in New Mutants number 20 and in Prisoner X. I want to see them show up on page over and over in other X books under other writers. I want them to become a bigger part of the cast. I want to learn more about Leo and Brother Nature and all the other characters that have been introduced from Prisoner X. I want to see them again.
That's a great point. And I there is definitely no one in the X's for Podcast team, and maybe no one else on Earth who will be as excited that everyone here wanted to talk about Generation X. If I had known that this is where you all were going to go for me, I would have worn my Generation X t-shirts. And M-Plate should totally be here, not just because, he's a cool design and character. He is one of those just batshit only Chris Bacalo could design him characters, but because we got more M-Plate development in the dark period of, X-Men comics not being the best the last few years, the post-Secret Wars, pre-Hoxpox, than we did ever, even during Gen X. I mean, what we got from Cullen Bunn's Uncanny X-Men in terms of, what it did to Monet, and then following that up with Christina Strain's Generation X Volume 2, has put us in a place where this is a character that should be on the forefront of ones whose unique needs are being addressed and how he survives and lives in the new Krakoan era. Similar to the way that, it was brought up with Omega Red in the pages of Ben Percy's Wolverine. And so, M has been getting featured a lot. We've seen her pop in and out of a number of issues. She's the star of her own series now in X-Corps. How M-Plate is not brought up, I don't know. I will add to that because, my favorite, the character I'm always asking for more of, being Husk. I love Paige Guthrie. I want more Paige Guthrie. I never have enough. And another one too, and I've been so happy to see him in little bits and pieces, is Japheth, my boy Maggot, and Eenie and Meanie, who've been popping up lately and playing a good solid role here, kind of in the background. I love the kind of little cleanup team that we're getting with Maggot and Magma, and I think there's one other person in that's going out. We've seen him in Children of X. We've seen him in Children of the Atom. We've seen him in another book. And those are just some great characters that I would love to see kind of more of. And hopefully, Maggot gets a spot on something, these. And tying into Gen X, he was a member of Generation X for one whole issue back in the 90s. So he counts.
Yes,
he counts.
I agree. X-Men and Generation X member.
Yes.
Of one issue each, maybe two in X-Men. I'm not sure.
And it's a great thing. I always love more Dazzler and Longshot. I would love to see, I really thought we were going to get some Dazzler and Shatterstar stuff at the end of X Factor, and we didn't. I really want some Dazzler and Shatterstar stuff. Like, I would like meaningful Dazzler. We have been teased with so many little glimpses of Dazzler. I'm really hoping we start to get some meaningful Dazzler in the pages of Way of X. It seems that there's some really, really cool potential there with Dr. Nemesis. And honestly, like, this is where I really want to see the Dazzler Shatterstar stuff come up, because I feel like since he has no care about like feelings or filter for what the fuck he says, like, I just want a panel where like he looks at her and says something about like, you know, based on this or that, like, clearly like you've had a child and sometime around, you know, like, you know, this many years ago and blah, 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 blah. And she's like, what? I had a child? Because she's been brainwiped from it. It doesn't know that she had a child and it's actually fucking Shatterstar. And who better to make that revelation and bring it to her attention and kickstart that story than Dr. fucking Nemesis? Where all the books are in the current place and time in the reign of X post Hellfire Gala, what is your current major X ship?
Does it have to be a ship that is currently getting action, or can it just be a ship that you are really into at this moment?
Yeah, it can be a ship that you're really into at this
Juggernaut
moment.
and Black Tom, best ship ever. Case closed.
That's a good one.
That is a good one.
My favorite Hellfire Gala ship is going to still be the interactions between Magneto and Eric. Cherik is always a important part of my soul, important part of my heart. Those two old bastards love each other so fucking much. But Juggernaut and Tom, yeah, best ship.
I'm here. So I am here for the Jean, Scott, Logan, Emma, Polycule. More of that and more like a more variety. You know what I mean? Like we've seen it. Like I think we've seen the most out of Jean and Logan, but like let's mix it up a little bit. Like let's get some more Scott and Emma. Let's get maybe some Scott and Logan.
Yeah, Scott and Logan would be great. Let's pull Solemn in there.
Yeah, Wolverine and Solemn.
Yeah, Wolverine and Solemn and Scott.
And Scott. But you know what I mean? Like I just like play around with that. I think a lot of people are like arguing that it's like queer baiting and blah 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 blah, but I don't really see it as queer baiting, as opposed to like that's just like one of the techniques that Hickman uses as like this, like he doesn't use it in just sexuality, he uses it in his plot devices too. So it is queer baiting, but it's
the other thing is that that's clearly a polycule with hinges, right? Yeah, they are not all connected to each other, right? Scott and Jean are hinges for other relationships in there. And, you know, so while we've gotten little skirts of what that might have done to the relationship of Emma and Jean not being adversarial anymore, what it may have done to the relationship of Scott and Logan, I don't think it's the type of relationship where like Scott and Logan are sneaking off for bro jobs. Like I think that it's very much based around the hinges, the emotional hinges in it. But it is cool that I do like that we are seeing a different relationship from them as a result. So I don't know how I would feel about if we got like just a scene where like, you know, Logan's X-Force radio goes off and he gets up and it's just him and Scott in bed.
Yeah, I would like that. It seems healthier in general to have it as what it is now than a horrible love triangle. But I would also enjoy some trio action.
Yeah, it's just, the horrible love triangle is tired.
Yeah,
Polycule is wired.
Solve the problem. Just be okay with it.
Hey everybody, Nico here again. Now, I know that I'm a huge Valkyrie stan and a huge Jane stan, but this next segment is awesome. It's really been great seeing this interpretation of the success of Tessa Thompson's Valkyrie from the Thor and Avengers movies play back into comics and this amazing new character, Runa, and the ongoing narrative for Jane Foster, everything getting us ready for Love and Thunder. It's just really exciting as a Thor fan. And, you know, Danny Moonstar could still pop up any day, fingers crossed. Until then, check out this next segment.
Hey everybody, welcome back to X's for Podcast, the show where we take a look at comics, mutants, magic, and marvels week after week through their many monthly titles. I'm Nico, and you guys can find me on Twitter and Instagram at NicoAction. That's NicoAction.
Hey, it's Nathan, and you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at JazzlerAOA.
And I'm Jonah, and you can follow me over on Twitter and Instagram at PeakJonah. That's Peak. And we hope you survived this experience, unlike Moore did, impaled by Kraven in not the fun kind of way.
No.
Mm-mm.
You know, when I think emos and barely burly daddies, you know, it's usually a more fun kind of rough play than that. And instead, I think we can say now Moore is officially no more.
He's no more. Also, we don't really use the term emo anymore. We use Tumblr sexy man.
Tumblr sexy. Ooh. Okay. I also thought I heard you say emu, so we now just call emus Tumblr sexy. Got it.
I mean, the Great Emu War was a really big deal.
Yeah, well, of course it was. And from emus to Mr. Horses, we're here to talk about the Mighty Valkyries number 4, which I cannot stop enjoying. Gets a Marvel Legacy number of 18 at this point. I had to check because it almost seems impossible that this has a Marvel Legacy number. We're giving series 18 issues in Legacy numbers. I don't know if I love it because it's kind of tongue-in-cheek. Look at all of our modern Marvels. Or if I love it because it's sort of like Valkyrie matters, fucking deal with it, right? But whichever role it's playing, I do love that it gets a legacy number. I think it's a little exciting, but here we are talking about the Mighty Valkyries number 4 or 18 by the team of Jason Aaron and Torrin Grunbeck with art by Mattea Di Luis. And then we have the Runa story, whose writer was just Torrin Grunbeck, who I would love to have on just so he could tell us how bad we are at pronouncing these titles, right? The artist is Erica D'Urso, who we as a team are like clinically obsessed with as an artist. And her colorist is the incredible Marcio Menez, right? And there are a ton of additional people on this title, a number of variant cover artists, but of course, I just want to put it out there for the amazing lettering of VC's Joe Sabino. The lettering on this book does a lot of heavy lifting. And I think I want to start with my snide little comment about legacy numbers, guys. How do you guys feel about this book having such an impressive identity that they're already giving it a legacy number, like saying chain these minis together?
I think it's great that they want to put that emphasis on the characters. I think it's great that they want to make Jane important, that they want to lift Runa up to that level. I think to have a legacy numbering at 18 is sort of ridiculous. It's like, okay, come on, guys. So, I'm guessing that takes the Valkyrie series, the Return of the Valkyries, and the Mighty Valkyries, and squishes them all into the same thing. Which, I mean, makes sense. They're all basically the same.
And Valkyrie.
Oh, Valkyrie. Yeah.
Jane Foster Valkyrie,
Jane
which
Foster
ran
Valkyrie,
10 issues. So they're kind of chaining this all to Valkyrie.
So, I mean, it's cool to know there have been 18 stories of Jane Foster's Valkyrie, but is it really necessary for 18? Can we count on our own?
Could we have waited till 25?
Yeah, that'd been a better, cooler number.
Now, Jonah, what do you think? You've been a little silent weighing in on this legacy number debate that myself and Josh constantly bring up for no reason, like it adds anything to the discussion at all. I'm talking about essentially the way you put it in a filing cabinet, and we're so heated about it. How do you, as somebody who has no I got so emotional, I fucked up my headset. How do you, as someone who really wasn't a part of the legacy issues that we are so obsessed getting their due to, how does it feel that you see something like that? Is that just more confusing than it is helpful?
It's a little more confusing than it is helpful for me, more so in the sense that I don't know if it really adds anything for me in the sense of, well, it's just a legacy number. The number itself doesn't mean anything. I think the more important thing is that they're trying to say, hey, these are all connected. So if you're reading this, maybe you should go back and read this. Maybe you should go and read this in the future. And that part is absolutely fine, especially when this kind of is the exact same story continued, just with a different title. See Cable and then Cable Reloaded.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely fine to connect everything. I just don't know if the legacy number has any bearing on anything, actually. Also, much as I like the number 18, it's just a weird number. It's a weird, usual standard numbers are good ones for anything is you end at a 0 or a 5. When you're turning up the volume on something.
Yeah.
On a TV.
And I'm with you on that, right? There's things that I want certain things in multiples of 4 and certain things in multiples of 3. I think the legacy numbers have been on the covers since 16, might have been 15. I like the idea that they're chaining these stories together, but I almost feel, and I understand that I keep making these grand pronouncements for Marvel editorial, that these editors who are underpaid, underappreciated, underrepresented, and underserved in the community. I make all of these grand pronouncements about what they should be doing with all of that. But perhaps Marvel could find room to pay someone to chain together those Marvel legacy cards that said what built the legacy numbering that came out a number of years ago. Maybe keep them a little bit more up to date, have a QR code and just boop, and you can get that legacy checklist. All of a sudden, you have the legacy checklist, you know what you can read, you can go back. And if we're doing this in a digital world where we're talking about using a smartphone to just boop down and get your stuff, then you would be able to click on a link to Comixology to buy the issues. And I feel like we are at a point where things like legacy numbering should have a value. Just kind of pasting a number up there, for me, actually was kind of confusing, because I did have to say to myself, well, what are the 18? I've read everything Jane for my lifetime. Like, what the hell issues is this 18? Okay, so it's the 10 Valkyrie, then it's the Return of the Valkyries, which is, okay, then it's the Mighty Valkyries, and it's that other Valkyrie series that we just read. Like, it's so much. And I am excited to know where we're going, because something I have been noticing a bit more on the subject of where the book has been and where the book is headed is that Jason Aaron's part has been in many ways consistent throughout. Jason has written with Al Ewing on the title, and he's written now with Torrin Grunbeck, and he's covered so much ground in this universe. But I feel as though perhaps, not that his interest is waning, even if it were, he's been on Thor since like 2013, who could blame him for losing a little interest? But I feel as though I see Aaron kind of pulling back and perhaps handing the title to Torrin Grunbeck in some ways. I don't feel that necessarily Aaron's design isn't all over it, because it is. But I do feel like the Runa story, which deserves the amount of time it's getting, is starting to maybe overwhelm the Jane story in a lot of ways. Does anybody else feel like perhaps this is a point of transition for not just these characters, but maybe the title itself? Because it's starting to feel to me like it's going somewhere different, and I'm into it, but it's noticeable.
The thing that worries me with this is if the last issue, if the Jane story has to go mainly to Asgard, whereas in this issue they set up Runa's story to mainly be the Asgard proper story, and whereas before it was her going to these cool planets. Like, yeah, I think that the Runa storyline and type of art might overtake actual Jane story.
For me, I think the problem stems from they're very isolated in the two stories they're trying to tell. Runa and Jane are operating under different missions and doing different things. I've also found that when they're in panels together and they are interacting, there isn't too much chemistry, and I kind of get that in the sense that they don't really know each other. They're not really supposed to be best buddies. They're not besties yet. But they are both Valkyries, and that is a very bonding experience that anyone should go through, that I think should warrant a little more friendliness and camaraderie, where they understand where the other one is coming from, because they've both gone through the exact same thing. They are the same thing. They're both Valkyries. So it's just something that I've noticed that I think is where the problem lies, where you have these two characters competing for the main character of this title, and they're running on different stories where one might get something a little more interesting.
And I really agree with everything you're saying there, that they felt like they were on very different paths, and then there was kind of a sort of, for something that's supposed to be a sisterhood, something that's so sororal, I didn't feel a lot of sisterhood between them.
Yeah.
And I apologize that while you guys were speaking, it probably looked like I was turning into a ghost repeatedly. I was preparing some notes for this episode about some of the references, and I am excited to just share a little bit with you guys about some of what I think is leading to the disconnect. And again, I am so sorry that I am transporting through the rainbow bridge as we speak. But
Carol Ann?
Right? So Yarnborn is a huge topic of debate in this series. Sort of the fact that it is Rona's, and Thor is like, who's this lady? She's got my axe, and she didn't even ask. But it's cool, but she's got it. And, Yarnborn has been a very important item for a while. It's been Thor's kind of go-to weapon during his periods of unworthiness. He wielded it during most of the Jane Thor run. So it's kind of become a weapon that was really synonymous with him visually, and it's a strong, powerful axe. It's kind of close to the Stormbreaker that we've been seeing in a number of properties, but it really is its own thing. And it's one of Jason Aaron's creations. He used it a bit in Uncanny Avengers. So it's made the rounds. It's what he was wielding when he appeared in Jean Grey for a little bit of X-Men tie-in. And this weapon is, once again, a thing that perhaps pulls us out of the current narrative, that I think is part of why Valkyries maybe isn't sitting with everyone that doesn't have all of the Aaron Thor background. background. Now, Thor talks about being like god of the gods again. And we know he's like in Donny Cates's run. We know he's like looking like Fabio flying through the sky in some Janet Jackson Rhythm Nation gear. And he's Thor now instead of the guy wielding Yarnborn. Did it feel a little bit difficult to step back into a very specific identity of Thor in time? We're 12 issues into Donny Cates' series, if not more. So did you guys feel like the idea of where this book is coming from is still relevant? Or is it perhaps like Yarnborn feeling a little bit Yarnborn's my favorite Thor weapon, but does it feel perhaps a little bit like it's a thing from a previous run that's just kind of resurfacing?
For me, personally, there isn't too much in that shift of identities for me because I haven't read a lot of Thor. So if you give me a Thor, I just understand it as, okay, that's just Thor. I don't know a lot of him as the son of Odin and being not All-Father. As of right now, this is probably the most Thor I've ever read, except for that time where he was in, I want to say he was in Contest of Champions?
Or Secret
Wars. Secret Wars.
One of
He was in
them.
Secret Wars. That's like the extent of how much I actually know about comic book Thor. So it's not too much for me to really buy into Thor's role as the All-Father and Sif being his Heimdall of the Gatekeeper. Do you hold the key? I don't know why I was thinking of Sigourney Weaver in Ghostbusters, but like that's where my brain went.
There's never a bad time to reference Sigourney.
No, never.
No, never. For me, it's not, there isn't too much of a shift for me, and I also don't mind it because this book was never meant to be about Thor. Yes, it's an Asgardian title, but I really don't expect to see a lot of Thor in this, or at least I hope not, only because this isn't his story and he's not really needed. He's a cool character, and obviously, I saw a tweet once where someone said, Thor might not be your favorite, but everybody loves him. I'm like, yeah.
Okay.
He kind of really, there really isn't too much to dislike about Thor. I think he's just a very wholesome himbo bro. He's the leader of the frat that's actually like the most respectable frat at the university. They do actually a lot of charity work. They're really open to like all of their LGBTQIA members. They're really accepting. They host plenty of benefits and they don't sexualize women.
Yeah, sometimes.
When they don't want to be.
Oh, okay. That is a good point.
Yeah, that's, I like the idea that Thor is always kind of a likable guy in a lot of ways, because he can kind of suck, but he's hard to hate. I really get that. Now, Nathan, I know you've always had interest in reading more of the Aaron run, but you maybe haven't had a chance to. Does this jibe with what you thought would be the identity of the Aaron run, or in some ways, are you still maybe missing some of the context?
I haven't gone back and filled all the gaps in. It jives very well with what I have read, which was mainly just like the Jane stuff. So that characterization does jive. I've been reading the Kate stuff now as it's been going on, and yet the characterization really doesn't jive as well, but Kate's in that last issue kind of wrote in something which kind of like does a fix-all for all of it. I love Thor's protectiveness over the axe because in that way, thinking of it from that terms, he didn't remember that Runa was the original owner. He probably didn't even think that anybody else besides him had Yarnborn before. So like for Runa to be like, no, this is my axe. What the fuck are you talking about? Like, this is mine. Like, no, not yours. You just borrowed it for a hot minute. Really jives well.
And I like that she's even like, oh, and he was kind enough to use it well in the time and, God blood stain it and stuff. And it was, we knew that it was forged by dwarves and we knew that it was in the Asgardian armory. That's what we knew of it. And it is a thing that came into being in recent years, but there were some references to some things that came out a much longer time ago. So one of the things that helps distinguish the era of Runa the Valkyrie from, Brunhilde or from Jane is Runa clarifies she served under Bor Burison, which is Odin's father, right? And the joke is always, if you think Odin's tough on Thor, you should have seen Bor on Odin. And I wanted to do a little research because I, like many people, know Bor best from JMS's Thor, issues 7 and 12 from May 2008 and January 2009. I was curious if Bor had appeared prior to that. Bor appeared in October of 1963 in what is the 100th issue of Marvel Canon in Journey into Mystery number 97's B story. The B story is frequently at that point talked about as Guardians in a pretty big way, as can be seen in a number of the collected story in the upcoming Loki omnibus. that I don't know how they can keep printing those because it's just like a best of Thor. But, after that, he didn't appear again until September 1976 in Thor Annual 5. So, and to date, since October 1963, Bohr has had 14 appearances. Now, 3 of them were in the New Mutants Loki Journey into Mystery crossover, Exile. So, and 2 of them are in Brian Michael Bendis's Avengers Prime. And it's really interesting to me that they went out of their way to reference Bohr. Jonah, did you have any idea who Bohr was?
No, not in the comic sense nor the mythological sense. So this was just a very new name to me. So I guess that makes Odin Borden's son?
Borson. He's Odin Borson.
Borson. Okay.
Now, how did you feel about it, Nathan?
I'd heard the name, but I hadn't really read much of the character, so I'm always like, oh, okay, that one guy, right? So like, it's kind of like, when you get the crazy mutants on Krakoa, you're like, oh, that's Birdie or Cat's Eye or whatever you want to say it is. But like, yeah, do I know anything about him or not? But yeah.
Now, there was only one other reference that made me kind of go, and that was to the World Eaters, right? For those of you listening at home, that was me wagging my fingers really excitedly and quickly. And the World Eaters are a reference to Matt Fraction's run on Thor. And the World Eaters appeared in a story arc that went from issue 615 to issue 621. What I find so interesting about referencing the World Eaters is Thor 619, part 5 of the World Eaters features Bohr. So I find myself very interested in where this might be going. Additionally, one of Bohr's earlier appearances is Siege Loki, which is a Kieran Gillen issue from the JMS era. But to my point, with this one issue's references, Aaron and Torrin Grunbeck paid tribute to the JMS run, the Kieran Gillen run, the Matt Fraction run. Well, and after that, you're just really in the Jason Aaron run for almost 10 years before going over to Donny Cates, which he showed up in his Donny Cates identity. In many ways, I see this issue and this miniseries as a love song to the last couple of runs of Thor. And I have all of that context. It makes it pretty easy for me to be amazed by this. Jonah, you don't really have much context at all, whereas Nathan, you have some of the context. I think when you're reading a love song to a period like this, you do wind up in a very specifically, it's for one group only kind of thing. How do you guys feel about the accessibility of this title as a whole? I think as somebody who's read everything, this is a beautiful continuation of the things I love. But how do you guys feel with less experience?
With any love song, right? If you've to an era like that, if you've read everything, you're going to get all the little nods, all the little in-jokes, all the little winks, and you're going to be like, oh my God, yeah, they brought up so-and-so. But even my mid-range knowledge of that era, like, I'm like, this is great. This makes me want to go back and more and be able to get all of those little in-jokes because it's so well presented. It's lovingly love songing the era. It's not like, hey, let's just throw together some like crap. It is not that at all. It's really well done. Art beautiful. It's something that's gonna make, if you read this and you like this, you're gonna want to go back and reread all of it.
I think I have like a little bit of a different opinion. It more so, from my perspective, a lot of the context of what makes this even better, I feel locked out of because I don't know it. And I don't know if that's fully fair to new readers to have them feel like they're at a big disadvantage because they didn't read everything beforehand. And not that it's a lot, but it's more so in the sense of it kind of feels like I'm outside of the joke. It feels like everyone's able to laugh at something, but I don't understand the context of it. So how do I get to laugh at it and how do I get to enjoy it? There's still things about this story that can make it stand alone, but the love song without a lot of proper explaining, if you're just going to do it as an homage in a sense, you're going to miss out on a couple of people who might not want to go back because they want to read what's happening now and they want to be able to understand what's happening now.
You know, I agree with you because I do sometimes worry about the accessibility of work. I think it's a terrific book and I think it builds in a way that we don't really get to see books build. And maybe that is why the legacy numbering is there. But you said that it's not a lot to read. I think you're being kind because I beg to differ. You need to read the first 25 issues of Thor God of Thunder, plus the appropriate Original Sin 5-issue miniseries. You would benefit from reading the body of Original Sin, but I don't think it's super necessary. However, Abuelit does show back up during the Jane Thor era. You then need to read the 9 issues that surmise the Thor run. Then it's Secret Wars with Thors. You could skip Secret Wars, but then Thors is harder to follow. After that, you should probably read the Mighty Thors era, which is going to also have Unworthy Thors, and you're going to need to read all of War of Realms for it to really make sense when you get to the Del Mundo Thor. It's a lot, man.
Yeah.
It's like 150 issues. It's a lot. And it was enhanced, as we just discussed, by all of the incredible stuff that came before it. And one of the things that came before it that definitely had a huge impact on this issue for me was finally getting a better sense of the Hela and Carnilla stuff. I feel like that's been building for a really long time, and I feel like perhaps I got a little bit more out of the Kraven stuff than I'd previously had, and that kind of helped me a little bit. I appreciated seeing a little bit more of the babies, but I still kind of feel like I don't exactly understand what's going on. How do you guys feel about this story of women trapped in this cycle? Is it going somewhere for you guys? Because I can see it coming due. I can see the next issue doing something. And then perhaps we relaunch with an issue 20 down the line or something. But where are you guys at with the development of this narrative?
I would like to go on record saying that I love this. This is a big old heavy women love women kind of book. There are a lot of beautiful women loving women in this title. So if that's your thing, you might want to read it for that alone. That was one of my points while reading this and thinking about the Hela Carnilla stuff. It again feels like something I'm out of the loop on. I feel like a little more explanation really needs to go into their relationship, into, well, has Carnilla been having those, that internal clock of she wants to have children, she's not sure how to go about talking with Hela. Why was she hiding it from Hela?
Well, so Carnilla was going to marry Balder, but then some manipulations in the lead up to War of the Realms led to Carnilla manipulatively marrying Hela to protect the 9 realms. And Hela is not one to spit in the face of such a great deal. So Hela was like, I'm in. Let's do this. Fine. And they've had a rather cantankerous marriage ever since.
So like all those old sitcoms where they're like the husband and wife don't like each other and they just
to the moon, Carnilla.
So Carnilla's like Hela can fuck herself.
Kind of.
It's just something that I wish was a little more prevalent and explained about their dynamic to help me understand the motivations of both sides of it. It's a lot to drop, and it's also just a very, heavy topic. Also, I don't know if Carnilla went about everything the exact proper way. I don't know if kidnapping babies as they're being born with magic is correct or moral, no matter how much you want them. But it's something that it was what I felt was the most being left out on from understanding and being locked out of. Because I feel like this is a very big catalyst, especially for Jane's story throughout all of this, that I think a little more time spent the motivations and helping understand their dynamic for people reading from this point on would really help benefit the story.
I would say that's probably like my biggest thing about the story. I wasn't sure exactly where their relationship fell. It does appear Hela kind of cares a little bit more about the relationship on a personal level than maybe Hela. I mean, yeah, Hela cares more about the relationship on a personal level than Carnilla does, but it's also expressed. Carnilla, obviously, I think like you said, Jonah, is wanting children, is wanting life to grow in this place where life comes to end in hell, not to grow and be created. So I think there's just it's really shining a light on that problem of their relationship. I also think it's interesting how this issue came out. Marvel also came out with a symbiote Spider-Man, which features Carnilla in it in her classic look and classic regalia. So I think it's interesting if Marvel is going to try to push these two characters more to the forefront of the Thor mythos than they've been presented as lately.
Yeah, and hearing that Carnilla appeared in this symbiote Spider-Man looking all kinds of wrong is a little interesting. It makes me wonder if perhaps that comes at the end of this arc, and maybe we see a change for Carnilla.
Well, Symbiote Spider-Man in the last run and arc featured, like, I picked it up because I was like, oh my god, it's Captain Marvel, it's Monica Rambeau. So, like, the continuity and where it falls exactly is very past driven.
So it's like Carnilla's just appearing.
Yeah, Carnilla's just appearing.
Like the flashback-ish. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's really interesting. Yeah, then I wonder if we're going to see her perhaps in Love and Thunder, or maybe in whatever follows Love and Thunder. I perhaps didn't expect to see a particular person getting a movie following Love and Thunder again. When Kraven showed back up and stabbed Moore. So Moore has this emotional epiphany, and suddenly a decent Tom Hiddleston lookalike and gets stabbed through the chest. And the thing, I mean, like, I'm not trying to be like a guy about it or anything. And I mean like a that guy about it more than anything. But where is everybody heading again?
Hell.
So where is Moore about to go?
Hell is actually dead.
So if he's, I mean, like, he's just about to go meet his buddies. Like, he just took the express train.
Speed run to meet your friends in the afterlife.
Right? I just gotta zip to hell real quick. And I don't know. I kind of feel like that's where it has to go. He's got to just be like, hey guys, I'm down here now. And
no, he has to go, oh, I'm a wolf. Oh,
I'm a dead wolf. Hey.
I mean, unless because I don't think he's going to, if they are going to Valhalla, I don't think they're going to Valhalla.
So how did you guys feel about Moore finally being like, I don't know, finally a person? So my name is Nicholas Joseph, legally speaking. So I have some affection for Nicholas Joseph Fury, codenamed Aquarius. As an Aquarius, I love me some Nick Fury. I love me classic Steranko Nick Fury. I love Ultimate Universe Nick Fury. I love Sam Jackson Nick Fury. And I love Nick Fury's hot black son, Nick Fury. I love him too. And I saw Marvel put so much behind him and then say, fuck it, it didn't work. That was when they were doing Battle Scars and the Fearless Defenders. Speaking of, Valkyries, and it wound up not working out for anybody. And, we've seen a much larger reinterpretation of classic Nick Fury in the last couple of years. And I really do think that there is something worth attempting to create a version in the comics that reflects the version in the films. It's why Donny Cates' Thor probably looks a little bit more like long hair Chris Hemsworth. And it's why for a while Thor looked a little bit closer to Chris Hemsworth in Ragnarok. And why for a while Scott looked inexplicably like James Marsden. Like, we do the things that make sense for the films. Mystique became scaly because she was scaly in the movies, right?
That went nowhere.
Right? I worry about creating a wet dog version of Tom Hiddleston in addition to having the polished comic book version of Tom Hiddleston. Because we all just saw Tom Hiddleston's insane body. I think Loki is in nowhere near as good shape as Tom Hiddleston. So it's just that way that, a human being ages and a comic book doesn't. Loki in the comics is super beautiful right now. But seriously, Moore is like his sweaty cousin. What do you guys think about Tom Hiddleston's sweaty cousin, Moore?
Just keep dragging her. I do not like wet, slick back hair. It's not my kind of style. So it's something I used to do in middle school. And that's just every time I think of it. And no bueno. I did not look good back when I was in middle school. And I don't know if it looks good on everybody now.
You and me, kiddo.
I will say the trope of teaching, quote unquote, a monster to love is a little bit cliche and it has been overdone, especially like forever and ever since the 1950s and probably even earlier with all those monster movies. But I actually really did appreciate the dynamic and chemistry between Moore and Jane. It was, I hate to say this, it's actually a lot more interesting than it was with Runa. And I kind of wish that they had two separate titles of doing two separate Valkyrie things that maybe like intersected. But this one was about Jane teaching Moore how to be like
a person,
human and empathy and like have emotions. Their dynamic actually worked a lot better than I was not only expecting, but just it felt like a much better duo to have in a title than what they set up for who should be the two characters to have the chemistry.
Yeah, I'd agree. Like, Moore and Jane, they had some amazing chemistry. Like, even in that first battle fight scene, like, you could tell that Jane really took a shining to them, that they were really like, oh my gosh, you are not the monster you seem to be, which, yeah, you're right, is a really tired trope, but it's compelling. So that's why it keeps getting revisited, right? Runa and Jane, like you were saying, they don't really have that sort of, like, Runa's more like, get out of my way, I want to like flirt with your hot friend kind of thing. And I don't think Runa has that desire to be in that sisterhood of Valkyries like it's always has been presented to us in the past. I think Runa, she's like, nope, I'm done. I did it before. It's not my thing anymore.
And maybe now thinking about it, it's very similar to this idea of old guard versus new guard, of people who have paved the way and done stuff before versus the people who've, come into it later and are now doing it. And not that there's a disrespect from one end to the other, but there are times where the older guard do things in an established certain way, and they are set in their ways where they don't really care for the new guard. They don't like the way that the new guard would do things. So they would, you play by your own rules, but if you're not playing by their rules, they don't think you're doing exactly what they're doing. So it might be a commentary on that, and maybe they're not supposed to be friends or sisters, but it feels like there are hints of it, so I'm confused.
And I think we might see a new job for one of them. If one of them became the Queen of Hell, I wouldn't be surprised. Angela was Queen of Hell for a little bit. They made a weird decision in making Hela Angela in the movies. That was kind of a weird move, and it kind of changes the dynamic of how that interacts with the comics now in a lot of meaningful ways. So I wonder if maybe we'll see Runa as Queen of Hell and Jane continue to be Valkyrie. Of course, there is the moment we need to talk about now. Did everybody else see that fucking Pokemon looking nonsense? Be like, I'm going to eat you, Hela. And Hela was like, what? So we have a big old dino, and big old dino is all chomp chomp. And I'm not sure what's happening. Is this a deeper hell? Did Runa coming back bring some other kind of hell with her? Is there some alternate darker hell? Is there a 10th or 11th or 12th realm that we need to worry about? What does this dino dragon mean? And what is it meant to look like? Because it's kind of got some flashes, perhaps, of some King in Black stuff, but I don't think we're supposed to think it's one of those dragons. So what is this dragon? I don't see anything about it on any of the sites I've checked. I racked my brain. Is this a Thor thing I'm just not thinking of? But I don't see anything. So who is this dragon, and what is he here for? Do you guys have any thoughts?
Well, I mean, even gods have bosses, right? So even the cosmic beings have the one who sits above or whatever,
Yeah, the one above all.
Yeah, the one above all. Thank you. I was like, what is his name? But so even gods have bosses. So I think this is Hela's boss coming in and saying like, what the fuck kind of realm are you running here? Like, you're letting like life grow here in hell. Like, fired. You're like, we got to get you out of here. But like, that's what I think it is.
Your half torture hell sounds like heaven. Get the fuck out.
See, they're like, wait, this hell is not a place of suffering? It's supposed to be. That's in the handbook, day one.
I summon my purple-eyes bone dragon in attack position.
No, you must be careful, Joey. That is a dangerous card to summon.
I'm Taya.
I mean, and my only other one is like Pegasus, and he's like, oh, Dragon Boy. And it's... Save us.
It did kind of like, didn't they do something like that in New Mutants though? Like with the whole second Valkyrie arc? Like, I seem to remember like some big dragon, but it might have just been Hela's head. So maybe I'm misremembering that.
Well, I guess we all got to do some homework. Now, Jonah, what do you think about this dragon in general, other than the fact that it's very Yu-Gi-Oh?
I think it goes in line with what Hela said before, that the realm of the dead has a lot of secrets she would know. I think this is something that she was not aware of, and we're going to see how that plays. I am also unsure if this is actually a part of hell and a being of hell that Hela might have not have known about, or this is a conjuration of the children who are so very literally godly powerful, that this fear is their manifestation of how they're trying to protect themselves and their mother, who they just kind of saw die and get impaled.
Like, what if they're like fear god people?
Ooh.
And they're protecting themselves. Okay. So, that brings me to my wrap-up question. We have one issue left. Legacy 19, Mighty 5. How do you guys feel with this bigger-than-life story that had a solo series that wound up a team book in one crossover, and now it's a duo book that's sort of set like 2 years earlier in Thor's mythos without being any in the past at all, except for the Flash stories. Now we have current Thor showing up. There are so many things going on here. Moore just died. We have Hela and Carnilla's story. This might be the queerest positive book at Marvel in some ways.
Yeah.
Between Moore and Hela and Carnilla, and the amount of characters of color getting spotlight here. This is
And Runa.
It's a big deal, man. This is a very queer, very diverse book. And I think that's a really amazing thing to be coming from, in many ways, a guy you could label a straight white guy in Jason Aaron, right? And I love seeing a woman artist on this book in the form of Erica Durso, right? That makes me so happy. Where do you guys sit with one issue to go? What's your vibe, knowing that we have 20 pages to possibly wrap this up, maybe till after Love and Thunder?
I think that they have a lot of work ahead of them to wrap everything up neatly enough. It doesn't have to be a clean, packaging as they would have to on the Freeform show Rap Battle. It's more of the sense of, even if it's not wrapped up neatly, you can still set yourself up for titles later in the future for somebody to pick up. You don't have to end everything properly. You can have things be left off for either you or somebody else to, as a jumping off point for a later title. So I am interested to see where things are going to go, because it feels like, I don't know if this felt like a natural stopping point for the title. I felt like that could have maybe used maybe an issue or two, but
an annual, just something to get back out of the story, right? And get back into the characters for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm totally with you. I didn't mean to cut you off. I just meant to agree with you.
So I'm thinking it's not going to get wrapped up in really any sort of satisfying sort of conclusion. Like, if you think about love songs for eras, right? Which is what we're saying this is, right? So if you think of Doctor Who, right? Think of episode Turn Left. It was sort of a love song of the Tennant era where they went through all of that stuff.
There's something on your back.
But it's a total love song for the Tennant era, right? So, when you think of love songs, they don't really wrap everything up. They might present it in a way that you can move forward to get to the wrap up, but they don't really wrap the stuff up. So I think we're going to probably in this next issue get maybe not a conclusion even to the Hell arc, but we might find out more of this to set it up for a future story. I think we're going to get some idea of the direction Runa's going to go into, which will probably have something to do with taking care of Hell or whatever. But I don't think we're going to get a neat wrap up or really a satisfying conclusion. I think they're really setting this up for something else. And if you do try to wrap it up in one issue, there's way too many loose ends to even try.
And they're both women that we want to see thrive in the next couple of films. We want to see Tessa Thompson, and we want to see Natalie Portman, because we want to see Jane Foster, and we want to see Runa the Valkyrie. So I feel like we find ourselves in a really precarious situation where I don't know that I even want to see it wrap up. I would love to see the Valkyrie book just keep going as a partner book to Thor, kind of doing something completely different than Thor. Too often when you have a main character and a side character, the side character is just the support title that deals with the main character's fall off. But I would rather see Valkyrie be its own thing in the world of Thor while Thor continues being his own thing. And I would love another 6-issue series so we could get to Legacy 25, and that would feel good. And then a 5-issue series the year later to get us to 30. I don't know that I need them to keep trying ongoings. I maybe like the idea that Marvel could keep Legacy numbers going and cycle miniseries. It would allow you to do a Jane miniseries, followed by a Runa miniseries, followed by them together, followed by an annual. You've got room. Most people buy their comics by content, not by title these days. They come in and ask for X-Men. They're not like, oh, I'm going to stop at X-Men 21. They hear, oh, there's an X-Men #1 with most of the same team. It got set up in X-Men 21. I'll check it out. People don't break from characters the same way they used to. So that's, I think, my hope for this title, that it at least keeps going in some capacity.
Oh, I had a thought. What if the title is setting it up? So I know they've already tried this before with Fearless Defenders, but what if it's setting it up so that Jane and Runa have to try to recreate the Valkyrie core?
I would love it. I mean, and I think the smartest thing to do would be take women from the Marvel Universe that already would benefit from that. I don't want to see Vita lose Dani because they're doing such a great job with her. But I think Dani and Runa and Jane and Sif and,
Zarda on there. No, I'm just kidding.
Just, any one more person. Why not Zarda? Jason Aaron's connected to this book. That's a dangerous character that would take it in the wrong direction. That would give us a person who maybe isn't a great Valkyrie, but is a great character in Valkyries. So I would love that personally.
Hey everybody, Nico here one last time. So this next segment was a lot of fun. We had started Power Pack, the powers that be, a number of months back, but there was a whole lot of books coming out, and at some point, it unfortunately fell off our radar. So we wanted to make things right by covering the series in its entirety here in a new segment called Trade Waiting, where we discuss the titles that maybe didn't make our radar in the first place going forward. We're going to take a look at these titles in trade, and we're starting things off with Power Pack. As always, guys, we love making this show for you every week. We'd love if you gave us a subscribe over on YouTube, Twitter, or wherever you get podcasts. And until next time, guys, keep those Crook Cohen gateways open, those mutant lights lit, and we'll see ya.
Hey everybody, welcome back to X's for Podcast. This is Trade Waiting, the show where we take a look at the stories you might have missed out on and want to know if you're ready for. I'm Nico, and you guys can find me, if you're ready for it, over at Nico Action on Twitter and Instagram. That's NicoAction.
Hey, it's Nathan. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Dazzler AOA. That's like Dazzler in the Age of Apocalypse.
And that's a good combination. Not only is Dazzler great, but Age of Apocalypse has aged really well.
Yeah.
There was like a time where it maybe wasn't the hottest thing, right? One of the things that the 90s did was the 90s sort of pushed out a lot of what was, because the 80s for me, like from my vantage point, I was born in 86, and my vantage point kind of feels like the 80s in comics sort of vacillated between somewhere around the Lost Boys and Punky Brewster. Those were the two speeds, right? And Age of Apocalypse, for the most part, Age of Apocalypse was like, RoboCop all the way. But there was a smattering of the heart and emotion that made the X-Men so great in the first place. And I think we've seen it more, especially as the original creators came back to those stories and were given the opportunity to delve into them a little bit more. Why am I talking about Age of Apocalypse? Well, like I said, I felt like the 90s kind of did push a lot of the 80s cuteness out. And one of the very traumatic losses from that was Power Pack. Now, I know not everybody is the biggest Power Pack fan, but I know the two of us are, Nathan, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So what was your first interaction with Power Pack? I think for me, it's X-Men 195.
So when I started getting into comic books, they used to have these like 2-packs. It would be like 2 packs for $1. So like or 50 cents. I don't remember what it was. It was a while ago. But like I would get these 2 packs and like I would look for the ones that had New Mutants. So like I got all like those old like New Mutants like 20s to 30 issues, and they would always be teamed up with like a Power Pack issue for some reason in it, which fine, it's cool.
Wheezy,
that's right? Makes sense actually. Actually, that was really good branding, cross branding, marketing on that. So that's how I got into Power Pack. I think probably like through those 2 packs, I used to probably collected like half or more than half of the series that way.
Well, let me just say that that's an amazing savings you have amassed, my friend, because one of the things that I discovered in doing a little bit more research for this title, of course, this title being Power Pack, The Powers That Be, by the team of Ryan North and Nico Leon. Hey, Nico, cool name, bro. And I know we started coverage on this, and then we kind of lost track of it because there were so many X books going on, and we were maybe a little concerned this would be a little bit more outlawed than it was X-Men. So we kind of put it on hold for a little bit. And here we are in our first episode of Trade Waiting, and we waited on it. The trade is here. Let's talk about it. So in the research for this episode, I came across a lot of information on the original Power Pack 1-62 that ran from August of 1984 to February of 1991. Now, this series is significant because it has held on to its value like I can't fucking believe. A lot of the issues pricing at about $8 $8, if not like 12 and 13.
Wow.
It's a significant thing. And I think it's because of the very seldom reprints it's seen that kind of maybe makes it a little bit special. Now, during that original run of 1 to 62, Power Pack also had a graphic novel on top of many other appearances in books like Secret Wars 2 and X-Men and tons of appearances. But they had Power Pack and Cloak and Dagger, Shelter from the Storm Marvel graphic novel in 1989. And then shortly after the conclusion of their series in holiday fall season, that thing where, you release the holiday comics in fall, so everyone has time to buy them. In 1992, we got the Power Pack Holiday Special. It would be some time before Power Pack were given any significant treatment. And then in 2000, they were given a 4-issue miniseries. That was not the restart on the franchise I think Marvel was hoping for. Of course, 2000 was sort of a rough time for Marvel in general. And we wound up with one of my favorite iterations of Power Pack, the Mark Sumerak and Girahuru era of Power Pack, which saw from May of 2005 through April of 2009, Power Pack 1 through 4, X-Men in Power Pack 1 through 4, Avengers in Power Pack 1 through 4, Spider-Man in Power Pack 1 through 4, Hulk and Power Pack 1 through 4, Fantastic Four and Power Pack 1 through 4, the very differently named Iron Man Power Pack 1 through 4, Power Pack Day 1, 1 through 4, Skrulls versus Power Pack 1 through 4. So this fucking Power Pack side series universe even got it on Secret Invasion in its own way. Fuck these dudes, right? And then it all kind of culminated with Wolverine Power Pack 1 through 4, which ran January through April of 2009. From there, Power Pack received very little love until the sort of groundbreaking era of Marvel Legacy did a lot to reset what we thought about a lot of that universe. And we got Power Pack number 63, which technically shipped in 2017, but it has a cover date of January 2018. Now, I was not really still interested in Power Pack by the end. By the end, it was being written by a guy by the name of Michael Higgins. Now, Michael Higgins is awesome, but what I know Michael Higgins best for is probably his sort of Excalibur fill-in stuff and like the occasional annuals appearance. So I don't know that I don't like Michael Higgins as much as I don't necessarily associate him with the best of X-Men. So as somebody who is a Power Pack fan, how did you feel about getting this conclusion? I mean, literally 26 years later, how did you feel getting this final story, putting kind of the end you needed? Or were you just kind of like, why did they go?
I literally loved those runs. I don't think I loved that issue. I love the idea of the titles being revisited because they also did Dazzler 43. And so I was like, oh my God, yes, these people are getting all these like final issues or like, like a continuation. And the issue itself was middling there. It wasn't like great. It wasn't horrible, but it wasn't like, oh my God, I've got to get this. And like, this really was necessary. So that's
it wasn't the defining issue. Maybe hoped for a 26-year later finale.
You'd hope.
Now, were you a fan of the Sumerak Girahuru era? I mean, I just think it was so cute. I worked at a comic shop during those years, so I picked up a lot of those digests. I just thought they were so sweet. As someone who maybe has a stronger affinity for true Power Pack, do you maybe not feel as warmly as I do, or are you on the warm train?
I'll be honest, I really stayed away from them because I don't necessarily love out of continuity tale, right? So it's a totally separate universe.
Mr. Dazzler AOA, I get it.
Well,
No, I get it. It's totally different.
Yeah.
One has bearing on the final outcome of the characters and invented beautiful new iterations, while the others sort of, and no offense to the creators I just said I love so much, maybe dumbed down some of Wheezy and June's spectacular familial development. And that I do get.
Yeah, it seemed very like Power Pack Calvin and Hobbes to me, which is not a bad thing. It just
not bad at all.
Wasn't something that drew me in. I did read a few of them. They were cute. It just never really drew me in, and it was never like, it wasn't my Power Pack, right? So
say no more, because like we recently ran a segment. In fact, it's going to be part of this episode, so I'm responding to something in this episode. That's amazing. Yes. So number one, in another segment, some of our amazing correspondents, Josh, Steve, and Drew, said there are no bad runs of Daredevil. As a guy who's literally read all of them, I promise you, if you look hard enough, You'll find them, right? But beyond that, I loved everything that the guys said. It was such a beautiful discussion of what they love about comics. And one of the things that they specifically said that they loved so much. And I feel so funny because like I'm not coming at anybody for their Daredevil preferences. I don't want anyone to think that that's what I'm saying. But the group said that one of the things they don't understand is why Generation X isn't more in print. And I definitely agree with them. I maybe do think that Marvel is staying away from a number of the creators who worked on Generation X on sort of the beginning end and the end, right? I think the middle creators, like the brilliant Jay Farber, is, so underappreciated. I am a famous Larry Hama stan on this show. I talk so much about what a genius he is, but I always do make sure to make the joke. I just don't know that Larry Hama had his finger on the pulse of what was cool and exciting in the teenage years of the mid-90s. So I'm not sure what happened there. But I bring all this up because I think Christina Strange Gen X is my Gen X.
Yes.
I don't even know what to say because, I've read let's go with 85 of the original. Let's throw in underground special, annuals, crossover issues, tie-ins. Let's call it a fat 85. Let's even, and let's throw in the intro. Let's call it a Thickums 100. Okay. Let's say Gen X Volume 1 is a Thickums 100. I still like Christina Strange Gen X a little bit more at 11 issues, 17 issues, whatever it was. And their total appearances is not much more. It just really rang true with me. So I really do understand the idea of something that is so a part of who you are growing up as a comics fan. Something, because we all have that thing we magicked into. I actually magicked into Daredevil. My dad bought a multi-pack and gave it to me. That was the first comics I ever read. So Daredevil really imprinted on me. And for those of you who know me well, the second comic I ever read was a Green Lantern comic. So you might understand why I have a complete collection of all the rings and why when I go to Great Adventure, I cosplay Green Lantern. You might understand these things a little, right? And so I do get this idea of transformation of something you love into something not quite what you wanted. Now, my further investigation led me to something I didn't know existed, which was a one-shot in 2019 called Power Pack Grow Up.
Yeah.
I didn't know this was a thing. And, could you tell me a little bit more about it? Because I don't really understand what it was, because here the kids felt much younger. Julie feels 20 fucking years younger than she was 20 years ago in the Loners. And, I feel like I expect some continuity on characters like Franklin to be fluxy, but these kids, Jack is very stunted in where he was in 1984. Yeah. As somebody who teaches these kids, I'm not sure that Katie was written to grade level. Truly, her art, it would indicate to me perhaps we needed to work with her a bit more. Like, as like a parent, I would be concerned about some of the spelling errors because we know her to be like, wasn't she 14 at one point? Like, so what is grow up, and why don't I understand how 63 grow up and this can all function together?
They can't.
Okay.
And that's the problem I have with this mini series. Is it really it's not a horrible story, but at all. It's a decent story, and it doesn't fit in. There's a lot of continuity issues, and even so, talk about one of the plot points in this miniseries was, hey, we really want to tell our parents that we have powers, right? They did that. The parents had a breakdown. When they found out their kids were superheroes. They literally cannot tell their parents that they have powers, or else they'll have a breakdown again. So the fact that was a plot point in this miniseries was problematic to me because it really ignored a big plot point in the past for Power Pack. Same with costumes, right? So they're how many times do we see them in this miniseries putting on costumes when hello, you just costume on and Well,
I mean, and they kind of seem to artistically costume on, they seem to magic it. And I wonder, because I had both of the same issues, right? I wonder if we're trying to stay away from problematic mental illness tropes, but in order to do so, we've oversimplified what we're talking about, right? We're kind of in an effort to correct the course. We're just kind of pretending that didn't happen, which in many ways invalidates a number of the stories that are why we're even doing this, right?
Yep.
And secondarily, I feel like it's the term you and I use the most, MC unification.
Yep.
If Power Pack are going to get an animated series, they're going to need a magical girl transformation.
Yeah.
And to have, Nico Leon come in and design this super cool sort of like touchpad transformy magic, that's really endemic of how the comics can't get away from their counterparts anymore.
Yeah.
I do share your problems. Even if I can reason them away, they do kind of get to me a little bit.
And this might be part of it too, but like in between Power Pack, right? Alex Power spent a good chunk in New Warriors, right?
Fantastic Warriors and Warriors from New Year's.
Yeah, the Fury Warriors, whatever they are, the Fantastic Warriors. That would be it. Yeah, he was in New Warriors, and then obviously and he was a big part of that
Future Foundation.
Thank you. I was like, it's FF, but what is it really called? Future Foundation run.
Fire Fist. What is it again?
Fire Fest. Oh no. Like, why didn't they go to the Fantastic Four to try to have them be one of their mentors? Like, oh my god. Like, and I get it when you put it that way, that they're trying to make it a very MC unification kind of thing to it, trying to revisit and revamp it a little bit. I just think, whereas some stories have done a great job of telling it, like America Chavez, right? Made in America has done a great job of saying, hey, cool, all of this stuff was what she thought, but this is what it really is.
Yeah, there's a little difference, but we're not disregarding what came before.
Yeah, so that's what I'm thinking this has to be. It has to be some of that. But then they reference the X-Men love,
and Wolverine shows up, and so essentially the story we're here to talk about is kind of in many ways a hard reset on Power Pack to a younger iteration that, while acknowledging bits of the continuity outside of it, is sort of reliant on a general sense of reset, right? And the story sees the four kids reunite for the first time in some time, as Alex has been busy and Julie is busy with Ricky, and Jack is dealing with burgeoning testosterone problems.
Oh no.
And again, I just want to make sure Katie's reading at grade level. Like, the educator in me is really concerned about her, because one of the things I did not get from this series was a sense of their ages.
Yep.
I feel like one of the best devices was having the narration rotate through the kids, because I was able to get a sense of who they were. No, I take that back. I was able to get a sense of who they are with no sense of who they were.
Yeah.
That's what I think I need to say. It almost feels like Commedia dell'arte, where you're kind of casting the role. The character doesn't need a backstory. The character, you don't need to know their motivations, because you understand that guy is the heel, and you understand that guy is the straight man. So you don't need a compelling understanding of the individual characters and their motivations, because you have a general understanding of the characters and their motivations. And that does a lot of the heavy lifting for you. And it's almost disappointing that there were references to prior Power Pack things, because I truly loved the jab at we can switch powers, actually, and how they don't do that, even though by now I would think these four kids would have worked together to learn how to do that.
Yep.
If nothing else, Katie and Jack would have. That would have been something the two who stayed behind would have had fun with. It would have been a game. And I have a specific thing I would have rather, and it sounds so strange, but this, for what this adventure is, could have been told a little differently and been the origin of a bold new young Black family of heroes at our Power Pack.
Ooh.
And there could have been a second Power Pack, and the original Power Pack could have been their mentors. And that would have been a bolder story, a stronger story, because my only actual problem with this miniseries, and I can't wait to get to all the things we loved in just a moment, but my real problem was, as contributor Jonah would say, commit to the bit. What are we here? Are we a Power Pack reset, or are we a continuation of the thing that we were talking about? Because I don't know which it is, and I'm feeling a little confused from it.
Yeah, I think your idea of recasting Power Pack as a team of color would have been amazing, would have probably solved my biggest issue with this miniseries, like overall, which was that it doesn't acknowledge the fact that all these kids are being incarcerated for being superheroes, but you've got the little team of little white kids who get away
running
with
around.
Yeah, they're running around, they're getting away with it. Like, okay, if that's something you want to point out, like bring up and point out, do it in a way that, cool, let's acknowledge that these kids know they have the privilege that they got away with what they got away with, whereas these other heroes didn't. But there's no self-awareness of that fact in this book.
Right. And, Ryan North dealt the hand he was given. And by that, I mean, I don't think writers come in and say to Marvel, I don't care what you got planned for 3 crossovers from now, and fuck your little movie studio. You can eat Disney Plus. This is my power pack idea, and y'all are going to do it because I just put my nuts on the table. I don't think any writer does that. And I certainly don't think someone who wrote this with the deft love that Ryan North wrote this with did that. I instead think Ryan North was told, either pitch me or pitch me Power Pack. He either pitched this story or pitched this story for Power Pack, and Marvel Editorial said this is what it needs to be in line with what's going on. We have this thing going, because they pitch these things 2 years out, and they probably said we have this thing coming up called Kamala's Law, and you're going to be part of the launch effect of it. And I feel like for that reason, Ryan North did the best he possibly could with what felt like a great opportunity to play a losing hand.
Yeah, the story is well executed. It's not a bad story
at all.
It's just the parts that probably intentionally don't fit are kind of what are my sticking points. And it's for them to continue publishing this book obviously means they have some sort of plans for